Here at CBR, we know our fans know all about the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but today, we're going to be traveling out past the bounds of the known MCU. We're talking about the Marvel Multiverse, which we've seen glimpses of in Avengers Endgame. We'll go more in depth and talk about how it could affect our dear friend, Peter Parker. Marvel Studios did something revolutionary when they came up with their cinematic universe. Back before they had even put out a single successful movie, they were already thinking 10 steps ahead and laying the groundwork for an unprecedented cinematic achievement. For a company struggling to get by, it was a huge risk. But hey, huge risk, huge rewards. And while something like this hadn't been done in the realm of cinema, they weren't totally going in blind. Comic book fans know the Marvel Universe started out on the pages of comic books, and we also know there's way more than just a single timeline our heroes have to play with. The world of Marvel Comics is a multiverse, meaning there are multiple alternate universes featuring many of the same characters. These universes can pop up due to time travel or some major change occurring. For instance, there's Earth 65, an alternative version of the main timeline. On this Earth, it was Gwen Stacy and not Peter Parker who was bitten by a radioactive spider. Gwen goes on to become a super awesome hero known as Spider-Woman, and Peter becomes the Lizard. No, not a lizard. The villain Lizard with a capital L. Peter ends up perishing, and Gwen is forced to carry the guilt and social backlash of his loss. But most Marvel comics take place in the main universe, which is known as Earth 616. This piece of comic book info pops up as a frequent Easter egg in Marvel movies. The first time we saw it on the big screen was all the way back in Thor: The Dark World. Dr. Eric Selvig fills a chalkboard with notes on the cosmos, and one of them reads 616 Universe. So clearly, the concept of multiple Marvel universes is something Marvel Studios has been thinking of including for quite some time. And we've seen more hints about it lately. In the mid-credit scene of Ant-Man and the Wasp, we saw Scott Lang get stuck in the quantum realm when the decimation claimed his allies. Then in Avengers Endgame, a heroic rat saved the day by pressing the control panel and shooting Scott out of the van, which was parked in a storage unit. The number of that unit? 616, of course. In a preview from Spider-Man Far From Home, we heard Quentin Beck tell Peter that they're currently in Dimension 616 while he hails from Dimension 833. We're pretty much Peter Parker levels of excited over the multiverse finally being confirmed to exist within the MCU. Now that we've covered what a multiverse is and confirmed that it's really here, let's talk about the SpiderVerse. No, it's not a terrible dimension filled with spiders. Movie fans first learned of the SpiderVerse thanks to the movie Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, which was put out by Sony and not Marvel Studios. It's no secret that Spider-Man is one of the most popular superheroes of all time. Hey, everybody loves their friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. Well, almost everybody. We're looking at you, J. Jonah Jameson. So it's no surprise Spidey's story has been told again and again and again in various forms of media. Spider-Man was even one of the heroes who kicked off the superhero movie craze back before it was really a thing. The original 2002 Spider-Man movie, directed by Sam Raimi and starring Tobey Maguire, was a huge deal when it came out. Because superhero movies weren't a thing yet, Sony was taking a risk with this movie. On the big screen, we've seen Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garfield, and Tom Holland all portray live-action versions of Spider-Man. But Into the Spider-Verse was something else altogether. It combined tons of different spider people, spider creatures. Yeah, Spider-Mans, from Peter Parker to Spider-Ham. The Spider-Verse comes from a Marvel storyline from 2014 which involves multiple versions of Spider-Man gathering together on a single timeline to save the day. Everyone knows that on Earth 616, Peter Parker is Spider-Man. But now, moviegoers got to see other characters like Miles Morales, Penny Parker, and Gwen Stacy taking on the role. If you thought seeing Peter Parker was pretty crazy, then you really need to read more comic books because there are a lot of crazy alternative characters. There's also the Superior Spider-Man, who has the mind of Dr. Octopus and the body of Spider-Man. Oh, and Superior is part of his title. We aren't making any judgments regarding his superiority one way or another. Ugh. In fact, one of the things we love about the multiverse is that there are so many possibilities. Sure, Earth 616 is the main universe, but we support the rights of individuals to have their own personal headcanons. If you think Spider-Man Noir is the one true Spider-Man, then we support it. If you need to pretend that Spider-Man 3 never happened so you can keep loving Tobey Maguire as Spider-Man, that's totally valid. although we still love that movie. So could all of these Spider-Mans be connected, and could they all exist within the confines of the MCU? According to Marvel Studios head Kevin Feige, anything that happens on the pages of a Marvel comic book is fair game for being incorporated into the MCU. And that's saying something, because things get pretty wacky, weird, and wild in those comic books. Like the time Peter Parker found out being intimate with Mary Jane had given her cancer, which claimed her life, causing her to come back as a zombie and attack him. No, that happened. We're just gonna go ahead and adjust our personal headcanons to try and pretend like it didn't, though, because we all can. That's what matters. Now, let's talk about Sony for a moment. As much as we all like to rag on the Amazing Spider-Man movies, they've put some great flicks together, and in their defense, they had an agreement with Marvel Studios to put out a Spider-Man movie every so often, or they'd lose the rights to the character. Although getting it off the ground has been slow, well, slow is kind of an understatement, Sony is trying to put together their own cinematic universe. Seriously, it seems like every time they announce a new movie with a Marvel character, it gets canceled almost immediately. Sorry, Black Cat and Silver Sable. But hey, we have to admit Sony did a great job with Into the SpiderVerse, and giving us a big screen version of Miles Morales. But wait a minute, is that the same Miles Morales who also exists in the MCU? Most of us know that Donald Glover is a big Spider-Man fan, and pretty much everyone was a fan of his show Community. In Into the Spider-Verse, there's even a moment where you see a televised version of Community featuring Glover's character in Spider-Man pajamas. Glover was campaigning to play Spider-Man, and social media took up the case. Many believed it would be the perfect way to finally get Miles Morales on the big screen, but it didn't exactly pan out. Still, Glover got the opportunity to lend his voice to an animated Spider-Man and make a cameo in the movie Spider-Man Homecoming. In Homecoming, he plays a man named Aaron Davis, and considering the fact that he's trying to buy dangerous and illegal weapons, we assume he's up to no good. This is in keeping with the comic book Aaron Davis, who's a criminal known as the Prowler. Oh yeah, and he also has a nephew named Miles Morales. Aaron tells Peter that he has a nephew who lives in the neighborhood, and in a deleted scene, we saw him call his nephew Miles. We know sometimes we can read into things too much when it comes to deciphering Marvel movie moments, but it couldn't be more clear that Miles Morales exists somewhere in the MCU. If Miles Morales exists in the MCU in some way, shape, or form, does that mean that Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield versions of Spider-Man also exist there? After all, many fans believe the older Peter Parker from Into the Spider-Verse was supposed to be the Tobey Maguire version. His backstory included a couple of iconic scenes from his movie, including stopping the train and the famous upside-down kiss in the rain. We're talking about people who got superpowers after being bit by a radioactive spider and how they exist in a multiverse. But the answer to this question is still pretty complicated, all things considered. This really all comes down to the relationship between Marvel Studios and Sony. Marvel Studios has been aching to get Spider-Man back for ages, and amazingly, were able to strike up a deal that benefited both studios. Marvel Studios got to make 2 standalone Spider-Man movies where they had creative control over the process. Spider-Man Homecoming and Far From Home were paid for and distributed by Sony, so at the end of the day, Sony was getting that sweet, sweet box office revenue while Marvel Studios did all the hard work. In exchange, Marvel Studios got to use their Tom Holland version of Spider-Man in 3 of their movies. Even though Peter Parker lives in the MCU, he's still owned by Sony, which is why they were able to include him in Into the Spider-Verse. At this point, it seems entirely possible that the Tom Holland, Andrew Garfield, and Tobey Maguire Spider-Man all exist within the same multiverse. Let's not forget that in the Sony graveyard of abandoned film projects was an idea for a Mysterio movie, and as we all know, Quentin Beck, aka Mysterio, is going to be making an appearance in Spider-Man Far From Home. What about the other universe he claims to be from? Could this Dimension 833 actually be the Sony universe? We're not saying Marvel and Sony are going to end up officially crossing over or combining their fictional universes. That doesn't really seem like it's ever going to happen, especially considering how particular Marvel is about their own universe. But these 2 studios did manage to surprise everyone by playing nice long enough for us to see a Peter Parker played by Tom Holland in the MCU. If the Sony universe is one of the many Marvel multiverses, this would be a cool way for all of the different versions of Spider-Man we've seen on the big screen to be somehow connected to one another. When we heard Sony was going to make a Venom movie without Spider-Man, we were skeptical, but they somehow managed to pull it off. Both Marvel Studios and Sony were adamant that the movie didn't take place in the MCU, but that doesn't mean it wasn't just far away in another universe. Could the Sony and Marvel movie universes be closer than we all think? Well, what do you think about the idea that the multiverse connects the Marvel and Sony movie universes? Take a moment to share your opinions with us in the comment section below. And then click on that subscribe button for more videos from us here at CBR. Hey, thanks for watching. We'll see you again next time.